Good morning. I'd just like to read from Genesis chapter 50, from verse 15 to 21. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "Perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil we did to him." So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, "Before your father died, he commanded, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father.' And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, 'Behold, we are your servants.' Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Now therefore do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones.' And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them." Up until this lockdown, I suppose we all thought we were in control of our own lives. But now, of course, we must obey the government's instructions. I'm sure Joseph would have felt that everything was before him as a young man, and he could do whatever he wanted. But if you know the story of Joseph, you know that this didn't turn out to be the case. We obviously haven't got time to look at the whole life of Joseph this morning, but I'll just list some of the things that happened to him, which he couldn't control. He was hated by his brothers. In fact, he was almost killed by them. Then sold into slavery, falsely accused of sexually assaulting Potiphar's wife, thrown into prison. And there he was, forgotten for at least 2 years, even though he was totally innocent. How did Joseph deal with all this? Well, he believed and experienced that God was in control of his life. I'm sure you know those words that we read in verse 20. "But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Rather than get his own back on his brothers and punish them as he could easily have done as he was prime minister, Joseph knew what God had done. He had meant it for good, to save all his family from starvation, and also the Egyptians, of course. I'm sure Joseph didn't understand what was happening to him at the time of some of these events, especially when he was forgotten in prison for 2 years. Perhaps like Job, when he suffered, he never blamed God, but I don't think he ever fully understood why all those sufferings had happened to him. Think of the Apostle Paul. If you read 2 Corinthians chapter 11, he lists all the things he suffered. And of course, he ended up in prison a number of times. And for a while, he was under house arrest in Rome. Yet despite all these difficulties, these men trusted in God and that he knew best for their lives. As we experience the inability to do perhaps what we want and go where we would like to go, are we still trusting in God? Think about what Paul did while he was under house arrest. At the end of the book of Acts, he lists some of the things that he did. He explained the gospel to those who came to his house. Well, do we have opportunities perhaps to speak to our neighbours about the gospel? Apostle Paul wrote letters to the churches that he had founded, and he was always praying for them. As you read through those letters, he's always praying for those churches. Yes, we are confined, but do we see God in control? Do we really believe that God meant it and means it for our good? Do we trust the providence of God? And as it's likely that we will continue to experience this lockdown perhaps for a number of weeks still, let's be patient Yes, it's difficult at times, I know, but Joseph was able to look back and he could see the hand of God. He could see the providence at work. And I'm sure as we look back to these times, we will see that God has been in control and has been working in our lives. Let me just end with those very well-known words in Proverbs 3 verse 5. And although well-known, still so important. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths.